just now was a video on TED by Dan Pallotta, who was also talking about success and failure. And he was talking about how we tend to judge NGOs by different criteria to the criteria that we use for the private sector. Essentially, and by NGOs, he also expanded that to not-for-profits, that effectively we expect success immediately. And that's simply not realistic, and it's not the kind of frame that, say, the venture capitalist community look at. They actually expect failure, and they learn from that failure. And the kind of percentages that they talk about are very different to the kind of percentages we talk about. We run a project and we say that wasn't successful, and therefore we're not going to continue that. But there is learning from that. And again, if we were to apply very different criteria, as Salim is arguing, then we would draw very different conclusions from that experience. So thank you very much, and the floor is now open for questions. We will continue the practice of taking several questions and then asking panelists to respond. So please. Eric, I believe I can see.
Thank you for those very interesting and enjoyable presentations. I had a question about what Jonathan just came back to, and Salim, what you were talking about. I think it's absolutely right that you have to look at a variety of approaches, try things. We don't know enough. It deals with the bottleneck of uncertainty that Yuan raised. And it's also been used in the past for long-term national crises. However, there's a difference between the portfolio investor and project adaptation projects that I wanted to raise because it raises a concern for me. If you have a startup and you put a lot of funding into a lot of startups and many of those startups fail or projects fail, the entrepreneurs went into it knowing they might fail. They pick up the pieces and they go again and they do it again. If you have a failed project in a poor community, they may not have the capacity to reuse the materials, and the local learning may not be transferred, and the local assets may have been substantially altered and be poorly adapted to the post-project situation. So I was just wondering if you had any thoughts about how to deal with this difference.
Thank you, Eric. Other questions? Yes, Noah?
Thank you.
Do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, well, my name is Nauraj Khatioda, and I am from AIT, because I would like to take its name because you are chairing the session. And currently I'm teaching in Kathmandu University in Nepal. Well, my question is, I think I would like to pick up the last presentation. There was a quote that prediction is very, very difficult. And I think it is not only difficult because of these uncertainties in the trends, in the assumptions, and even the natural principles. I think, of course, I'm not teaching that to my undergraduate students. The point is, now I think we are in a stage where we may have to reinvent the science and engineering because our history or the trends, what we used to believe, is changing. And so the empirical evidences or the design criteria, the norms, everything are put under the jeopardy. So because of that, my question now is, are we doing something here? Maybe the institute like Stockholm Environment Institute or JICA Research Institute or ADBI, there are a lot of, institute, Korean Environment Institute here. Are we thinking on these, putting some of our efforts in, looking at these design criteria by which we build up the infrastructure? I mean, because this frequency sort of thing or the discharge or whatever, the principles, the criteria, the norms, I think we have to look at that because we are designing with the same formula which are there in the textbook. So my question is, are there any efforts or how are we looking on this issue? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Noah. Next question. Yes, again, please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Drupad Chaudhary from the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development. I would like to pick on one of the slides that Johan showed about trade and put the question more to the panel and the organizers. I think, Johan, you hit the nail, as it were, on the right spot on. Because when we are talking about climate change, it's basically the economic models that we have been following, which are underlying this whole issue that we are talking about. And therefore, the question is, bring in the stakeholders that you are talking about. And a very important stakeholder, which we have been, to a certain degree, not bringing in, we need to do more about that, is the corporates and the private sector, even into a conference like this. And how do we then propose to engage to bring in these stakeholders? That would be to the organizers as well as to Salim as well, in terms of how we engage with them.
Thank you, Drupad. One more question? Okay, so let's take those questions. Sorry, let's take those questions to start with.
Hello.
We have one more?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm going blind. Yes, I see you at the back, right?
Yeah. I am Zaldi Luis Ro. I am a student, 19 years old from the Philippines. And I would like to commend the last speaker for bringing up about the social media, its usage and its advantage. I asked this question a while ago in one of our panels on considering the level of risk management of a country. We believe that it is an indicator of its level of development. My question is, how do you use new media, particularly social media, in providing or in gaining climate literacy and to invite people, engage people to talk about and act about climate change? Thank you.
Thank you very much. 4 very different questions. Salim, can I ask you to pick and choose, and we'll fill in the gaps after that?
Thank you. I'll pick a couple. Firstly, Eric's question on the potential for leaving behind more harm than good. I take the point. I guess what I'm saying is that one should be able to apply the principle of do no harm. So at the very least, we do no harm to the vulnerable. But we do need to try innovative things, some of which will work and some which will not work. And so that, I think, is what I'm arguing for, is not to be hidebound and only do something that we think is going to work, and therefore that's all we do. We should be innovative. We should stretch the envelope, try things that we know might not work. As long as they're not going to end up doing harm, then I think that is well within the bounds of our conscience. On the question of engaging the private sector, I've been trying to do this for some time now without any success. And I ascribe it to the following. Firstly, in the climate change arena, the private sector has engaged to a considerable and growing extent now on mitigation through the carbon trading, a price on carbon, clean development mechanism, etc. The advantage there is twofold. Firstly, there's a unit, which is a carbon reduction unit, and there's a price on that unit. There's a market price on it. People can make money out of it, and many people, many organizations and private sector companies are actually making profits out of it. At the moment, the carbon price is not very high, so it's not a particularly good market, but that's what markets do. They go up and they go down. We have no equivalent in adaptation. There is no adaptation unit, and there is no price per unit. However, it is not beyond our capacity collectively within the science community and the practitioner community here to come up with some sort of units. And I'll share with you some examples of the kinds of units that I happen to be interested in and working on, and that is at the community level. Let us take a community of a few hundred households. Per community of a few hundred households, how much will it cost to help them to adapt to whatever it is they're vulnerable to, floods, droughts, whatever? And if you look at small-scale community-based adaptation and other kinds of community-based projects. There are many examples. There are examples, I would say, in the tens of thousands out there, if you take a broad spectrum. For example, the UNDP Small Grants Program has about 5,000 or so, and many others. Then you have a rough rule of thumb of a few hundred households forming a community in a particular geographic area, costing in the region of $20,000 to $50,000 a year to help them. The input is not prescribed. It's not a solar panel or a well or whatever. It's whatever they need, they work out, but it's the order of magnitude of the investment that is going to be needed to enable them to be better off in terms of their adaptive capacity than they were before. Now, if we can agree on that kind of a ballpark unit, then we tell the donors, if you have $10 million, so many 100,000 people can be helped at that unit and that scale, and we need a good means of monitoring and evaluating it as well, which I'm sure we can come up with. So to me, the challenge is, collectively, can we think of adaptation units, and can we then price those units in terms of the cost of those units, and then sell those units to whoever wants to buy adaptation? The donors want to buy adaptation. We'll sell them adaptation.
You would like to address one or two of the other questions?
Let me just pick up the two questions. One is from the friends from the Kathmandu University and talking about the prediction and the changing the design criteria. Now, if we looked into that, the change need to be happen at the university level where the students are being graduated, so that they understand that the existing way of designing the infrastructure is not going to be good in the future, so it needs to change and bring the additional criteria in the designing of the infrastructure. And and planting that seeds should be in the universities. As Salim mentioned, that if we looked into the adaptation, it is in terms of the education of the scale. So in terms of that, it needs to be happen at the education systems, and I think that you are in the best place to help and integrate that how to design the future infrastructure considering the climate change. On the second issue is the social media, and that's basically what Johan has presented as a Facebook. Now, I just would like to remind that in the Facebook, and if you remember, the light of that on the map, where the brightening lights are coming from. It is mostly from the developed countries and some of the developing countries. Now, with this Facebook or the Twitter or the social media, are we connecting the actors those need to be connected? Is this the best way to connect those actors? And that's the reason I have mentioned that we need to go beyond that, the electronics and the social network media. We can connect some of those through these social networks, but not that we are targeting in terms of the vulnerable communities. And the actors, those need to be connected and get the information that will enable them to act. And let me end what I have been asked in the last forum while we're doing it in Bangkok and saying that, can we do this, the virtual connection? And I said, do you have any idea of the internet connectivity of the developing countries? And I used the country name from my regions in the South Asia is the Nepal and the Bhutan. And even if you looked into the countries that where you were saying, I'm sure that many of you are using the Facebook or the Skype for connecting your family back at home, and maybe you are the better place to judge what are the challenges that you are facing with this, the internet connectivity in the different countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Babu. Johan?
Okay,
you
thank
can address
you.
any of the questions, not just the social media one.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I'm too old to
all
really
of them.
address the social media one. But I will try to say maybe something that, just very, very briefly, Eric's question I think is very important about failures on project level. It's interesting though, but in a development context, we actually have examples of where we fail, try. I think they're more politically driven, but related to adaptation. Think about, for instance, large-scale water infrastructure. Should we build large dam or not? Should we have large irrigation systems or not? And there appears to be a pendulum there for various reasons. It swings, and we say that this failed, so we have to do this instead, and so on. So I think we have examples, actually. But you talk about the community level, which is a completely different thing. But that impacts on the community level clearly. The design criteria, I just want to say that I know a lot of countries actually are changing design on certain infrastructure based on climate models, for instance, already. And I think that a challenge has been that many countries and also even at the local level have not actually appreciated climate variability even. I mean, they have too short time series to understand that climate variability is much larger naturally even and what they have built, what the kind of infrastructure they have built. But I agree with you, there has to be some kind of learning process there. And I think that your proposal, getting it back to already education to understand uncertainty and variability is key. That's not something that comes natural to us, I think. Corporations, I'm very, very positive about having corporate sector more active in forums like this one. But I'm also actually sometimes a bit skeptical in a way because, the rhetoric is always very positive. But then sometimes you wonder also how much really is behind the rhetorics. And I think what's happening in the energy sector right now in North America with the development of shale gas and so on, it's a good example of this. We have a number of energy companies who are really going out and saying that they are the future and they have green energy and so on. But as soon as there is an opportunity in the traditional one, they go there. And that, at least, we should be realistic about. But I think, after all, that not least the private sector possesses a lot of capacities. I talked to a person from Shell, for instance, and he told me that they have 400 experts on water in Shell alone. I don't know any research organization having 400 experts on water. So the private sector is a very important knowledge provider, I would argue. And I think we can learn from their business models as well on communication. Social media. My answer would be we need to talk a lot more with the next generation who are using social media. My kids are 15 and 17, and I realize when I sit down and talk to them about how you can use these new tools, I don't understand anything. But if I could understand the power much better of social media and how you reach the next generation through that, I think we could achieve a lot. But we have to be very open about the fact that we, for once, who are used to being at the end of being the wise people and coming with the advice, we have to be a bit more humble when it comes to these new technologies.
Thank you, Johan. We can take some more questions. I think we've got time for one more round. So, yes, sir. Gentleman 4 rows back, I can see.
Yeah, my name is Klaus Schmidt, GIZ. I have a bit of a follow-up question to what Eric asked. I mean, I think it's very important to try many different things, to go for innovations because we're dealing with uncertainty and failure is unavoidable. But I'm now looking at the donor side. Where does the money come from? How will you solve this problem? Because projects are measured in terms of success, not in terms of failure. And if you have, for example, an NGO which has been very innovative, has tried many different things, but failed 3 or 4 times, will they then get money, or will the money not go to those who have been successful, even if they have not been innovative?
Thank you, Klaus. Yeah.
My name is Pitambar Arel. I represent Nepal Red Cross Society. I'm head of the Disaster Management Department in Nepal Red Cross Society. When we talk about adaptive capacity, then how long we will be talking on this? Whether we will really be able to develop local capacity unless and until we really put effort on mitigation, or at least have some sort of measures so that real factors could be reduced. And secondly, what I feel, or while going through our study, cost-benefit analysis, what we found is that investing 1 rupee in risk reduction or mitigation can save lives of around 19 rupees during response. And we have established some kind of evidences, and this was basically particularly done in our project, which was implemented in one district of Nepal. So somehow it is high time to work together or bring those kind of mitigation, adaptation, or risk reduction. But I feel that only adaptation may not able to cope those kind of situations. So it is high time to work on that and invest resources for as well. Thank you.
Thank you. One more question. Ulrika, is it?
So my name is Ulrika. I'm with SIDA, based in Bangkok. I have a question. This session is about learning from success and failure. And one aspect that I think of immediately when I think of success and failure is, of course, learning from evaluations, monitoring and evaluation, and how you really look back on what you have been successful in and failed on. And I think that's something we talk a lot about in development cooperation in general, and that we are very bad at doing. And especially looking maybe a bit longer back in history and doing